We are on the cusp of a major social change. Do you feel it? Even if you don't, make no mistake, change is coming, and it is going to be unforgettable. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Hart, and here on Prime Spark, where we work with and on behalf of women over 55, I want to help you find that spark that will ignite your way forward, reflect your gifts to the world, and illuminate your path through this next stage of life. Through these podcast conversations, I hope to inspire you to see how you can make a significant contribution to some of the gnarly problems that are facing us right now. Join me, and together let's discover our Prime Spark. Hi, and welcome to Prime Spark. I'm Sarah Hart, and I'm so happy you're here with us. Prime Spark is designed for women over 50 or close, with a goal to help us all live our happiest, most fulfilling and productive lives, now and in the future. The mission of Prime Spark is to change the way our society sees and treats older women. That's a big mission, which only means we all need to be involved, and we need to get going now. And today I had the pleasure of talking with Kim DeYoung, a woman whose work I greatly admire. Kim DeYoung is passionate about supporting others to raise their level of consciousness about the choices they make. She's a choice coach, facilitator, speaker, and author of The Book of Choice, drawing on years of experience and research. Kim unveils a fresh approach to decision-making that will transform your way of thinking. In her book, she shares her comprehensive guide and choice mapping process to equip readers with practical strategies to navigate life's complexities, empowering them to make choices that align with their values and aspirations. Kim's deepest desire and passion is supporting others to have meaningful conversations about their choices. So let's begin having one of those conversations. Welcome, Kim. I'm so happy you're here with us.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. So just in getting started, let me ask, do you experience getting older? And if so, what is that experience? And if you don't, why is it that you think that you don't?
I certainly think I do experience it. I'd be shocked to speak to anybody who does not. I think older is wiser. Older are some of the body aches that we feel. Older is the realization of, make each day count. Older is having an interesting perspective on where you've come from and where you may go.
That's interesting, Kim. I had actually never thought of it exactly that way, and I'm going to think about that. Well, I am fascinated with your work with choice. First of all, just tell us a bit about your book, The Book of Choice. What is it about?
At the simplest, The Book of Choice is a book that supports truly anybody who wants to be more thoughtful about making intentional choices. That's kind of the simple sentence. I believe what it's also about is it is a way, as you look at the choices you have made and the choices you want to make. I share a tool in the book called choice mapping, and that is just a beautiful self-discovery tool that allows someone really to get to the bottom of the truth behind their choices and really accepting, I did these things in making past choices, and I want to do these things as I move forward into present and future choices. Very, very powerful.
Describe it a bit more detail, what the choice mapping does. So it's a self-discovery. On the one hand, it seems obvious. On the other hand, how does more self-discovery help me make choices?
Well, what I teach in the book and what choice mapping really is it is a tool that is repeatable, and it's really a series of questions that you ask yourself as you're embarking on a choice. So imagine today you say, I choose to explore what's next in my life, as an example. And you begin to ask yourself a series of questions. Why does that matter to me? Why do I care about exploring that choice? Then you may say, what could hold me back from making that choice? What are the fears, the obstacles, the limiting beliefs? How do I want to show up? Like, who's the person I want to embody as I step into that choice? What may become possible? What's exciting for me? That's the very thrilling part. And then what actions will I take? And that's just at the high level. Obviously, you can go deeper and deeper in that process, but I teach that process through many, many different choices in the book, whether you're looking at personal choices, professional choices, relationship choices. It's like, I guess the simplest way to describe it would be it's a tool that you can become your own coach, as you have the ability to suss out all the components of a choice so that you can make the best decision from a place of confidence and clarity. Like, does this choice really serve me? And then as you move forth with it, now you're on a path. And if for whatever reason, a month, 2, 6, it doesn't feel good to you, you can go back to your map if you've written it out and say, do those things that I captured still feel resonant? If so, maybe continue on the choice. If not, make some tweaks and course correct.
One of the things that people are often told when they're trying to make a choice is, take out a piece of paper and divide it in half, have pluses and minuses. So this is really not that.
Here's the funny thing. My dad was a lawyer, and growing up, I was a girl who grew up with a lot of legal pads in the home. And for my big choices, we did just that. I would take the legal pad, I draw the line, I did the pros and cons. I certainly have done that. And there's nothing wrong with that. This just goes a bit deeper. This is sort of really looking at the details there's something very powerful. I mean, I guess I'll just say this. Like, if you were to say, there's a choice I want to make, and you specifically ask yourself the question, what could hold me back from stepping into this choice that I know that matters? That's a very different question than a pro and con. Like, just even asking that question is going to get your brain thinking in a different way. And if you were to now come up with some answers and then follow the thread of those answers and continue to dig and dig, you're going to get to a deeper place than you would have with the pro and con list.
Do you think it's important at some point to look at the negatives that could happen from my choice, or do you encourage people to assume that if something happens, you'll deal with it?
I think I view it from the perspective of when people make a choice, they're often, I almost view it as they're pulled in a tug of war. There are things you want, what's possible as you make the choice, but there are the things that could hold you back. And I think when you look at them honestly, you have the ability with adult eyes to say, is that limiting belief really a limiting belief? Am I going to let that thing get in my way? And you have the opportunity to say, it's not really such a big deal. I can push through that. Or you may assess, that really is a big limiting belief. I've got to deal with that. Or you may have a fear. Again, it might be an old fear that you've just kept saying on autopilot. And now when you hear yourself say it in this case or write it, you have the ability to say, that's not really that big of a deal. Or I want to do the work to clear the fear so that I can move forward. I mean, but what you're asking me, Sarah, is also, the truth is, of course, if you're moving forth with something and something gets in your way, yes, you have an opportunity to say, do I want to let this thing get in the way of that choice that matters to me? And actually, one of the most important questions I find that I want people to really dig into when they make a choice is, why does it matter? Because if you can't come up with a few reasons as to why this choice that you think you're stepping forth in matters, why bother? So if you've gotten the clarity of why it matters and you have a thought of like, oh, this and that could get in my way, you want to address it because you've decided that it matters. You want it. So it's really a beautiful opportunity to kind of assess what's going on for you. And that's why I call the choice mapping. It's like, it's a truth tool. I mean, it really is. It helps you get to your truth.
And I have no idea because I don't know your mapping technique, but I absolutely intend now, having heard you say all that, to get your book. I saw in my mind a typical, let's pretend we're taking a hike, in a particular hiking path, and then there's 2 or 3 directions I could go. So for me, that was what visually went into my mind with the choice mapping.
No, that's not what it is. And yet, that concept of the crossroads, that is probably the most quintessential thing when people imagine themselves at a choice. Do I go this way? Do I go that way? And there's a thought about that. And, but once you've chosen where you think you want to go, now it's time to look into it, and all those details.
How did you get interested in this? Where did this start?
That's a beautiful story. It was more than a decade ago. I was being interviewed for something unrelated to choice. I had no greater focus on choice than probably the average human. But I was asked a question in this interview, and my answer was something such as, what happens when we make a choice and take action? How does our life unfold? That was how I posed something. And I was left after that interview thinking, what does happen after we make a choice and take action? How does our life unfold? And I went back to a particular choice I'd made about a year prior. And it was an important choice for me. And I'm a visual person. So I grabbed a mind mapping software and I thought, what happened? And I noted the choice and I noted the people and the opportunities and the things and all that came out of that particular choice. I observed that in a 2-year window, I had all of these people and things and opportunities that had come into my life from one choice. Had I not made that choice, all of that stuff that was on this piece of paper, on this mind map, would not have been there. But what was very interesting was that I looked at this map in 2 vantage points. On the one hand, I looked back with immense gratitude. Had I not made the choice, all of this wouldn't have happened. But I also looked at it from the perspective of what would happen if I made a new choice today. What could become possible? That was where the magic really started. It was that query. And I showed the map to a friend who then said, please do it for me. And of course, I had no process, but I did. And she said to me, Kim, can you enjoy the process of mapping for others without needing to know where it's going to go? I said, that sounds like a lot of fun. And so 2014, I spent a year. I didn't know it would be a year, but I went on a deep dive exploration with 29 people, all different people in my life, to explore choices they had made. And in so doing, they let me into their life and we explored choices, whether it was a recent choice, a choice to get divorced, a choice to take a coaching program, a choice to, it was the gamut of personal, professional relationship choices. But in so doing, I got so much information and I started to really think there's something that I'm capturing here that I need to figure out how to translate this into a book and to begin sharing the messages. And one of the things that was quite interesting, I began writing a bit and I had never been a writer. And one of my first coaches said to me, Kim, I want you to take the stories of your maps and write them. And it was so easy for me. And I said, I must be cheating somehow because this is so easy. She said, it's not easy. You created the maps. You did the hard work up front. I had the deep dive conversations. I made sense of what was shared. I captured it in nuggets so that I could then make sense of it in a story. I mean, it was really quite a beautiful experience. And so after year 1 of having explored the choices of 29 people, I began to say, okay, there's something here. And I started to make sense of it. But what's quite interesting is it was a 10-year writing journey for me. And at the beginning, I never had any mention of the maps. Really, that was kind of my behind the scenes process of how I did what I did. And one of my writing editors said to me, are you going to share the maps? I think people might be interested. I thought, oh no, nobody would care. She said, I think you owe it to yourself to figure out the process. So I had to sit on my shoulder to observe, how do I do what I do so I could teach it to others? And that's kind of where choice mapping came to be. And in so doing, I created 3 types of maps. The one that I'm describing to you primarily is called an exploration map, where you have the ability to go deep into a choice you did make or want to make. Another beautiful map is one called an unfolding map, which is when you make a choice, what really comes into your life from it, from a place of appreciation, gratitude, possibility. And then another beautiful map is called a people map. Who are the people that come into your life from other people. So, for example, I had a coach 20 years ago, and I would say the bulk of my world comes to me through her. From her, I met a handful of people, and most of the people in my life I can trace back to that coach. It's fascinating. And it's just, again, there's something pretty lovely in doing that. I always like to know, how do I know who I know? There's something that's very grounding in that for me. So it's been such a beautiful process in having created this book and now sharing it with others so that they can do it for themselves.
What shot through my mind when you said that one of the first editors said, you need to capture this map. What went in my mind was that you would think, what map? I mean, at that point, I don't know that you were thinking about a map, were you?
Well, I created my own personal maps. At that point, I had the 29 people that I took on the journey. Each of them I had created a private map for. And I was creating these maps in a way to provide a new perspective with which to look at their choice. I had gone back through my entire past and mapped all of my past choices. I was mapping choices I was making. So I was well aware of what I was doing for myself and to others. I just never thought of teaching it.
Right.
So that was the opening.
So with that second map, tell me the second map again.
The unfolding map. So it's called an unfolding map. And that's actually that was the first map that I created when it was looked back at a choice. I had looked back I chose to go to a particular event. And from that, I met a woman. And from that woman, I got an opportunity and a person and a connection. And you can imagine the legs growing from that. And, if you were to think for yourself of any choice you have made or want to make, going back from a place of reflection of who did I meet? Where did that lead? What happened there? It's a fascinating process. It's just another vantage point to look at your life.
I love that. And what I was thinking when you said that was, you probably do this. If I made this choice, what would then happen? What are the possibilities that would happen?
Well, you're bringing up something so fun. So you are bringing up something which I am newly starting to do with people, which is using the unfolding map as an opportunity for manifestation. Yes, so imagine. So I have used it in the past as I made the choice, what came from it? But you can also use it I am making this choice today, and I have a sense of some things that are possible, and I'm going to put them on a map as if they've already happened, from a place of manifestation of what could come. So imagine, I wrote my book. So I chose to write my book. And now I've got all of these. I choose to be on TV, or I'm going to do podcasts, and I'm going to be on TV, and I'm going to create classes, and I'm going to speak at universities. And imagine putting all of that in a map as something that I believe is possible. And imagine looking at that on a daily basis for yourself, of reminding yourself, oh, this is possible. This could happen. Now, of course, you have to take actions towards it. Everything that I just mentioned, I take action towards, because action creates the momentum. But from the momentum, it's like, okay, we're moving. Things are happening. Opportunities present themselves. People show up. I say yes. There's a beautiful dance, and this is available to everybody. And I think there's something very powerful when you start to notice what's happening in your life at a more detailed level.
I love that idea, because when people say, oh, he's so lucky, I think, well, yeah, there is such a thing as luck. But most of the time, it seems to me, what he has done is explored, made himself available to say yes or no. So he didn't just sit on the couch and have good luck.
Yeah.
What are some of the major choices? I mean, is there a commonality to choices people are trying to make who are coming to you now?
I tend to group choices into the simple buckets. People are either making a professional choice. Am I leaving a job, starting a job? Am I going entrepreneurial? You could imagine the types of professional choices someone may make. At a relationship level, am I starting a relationship, ending a relationship? Am I choosing to work on a relationship that I'm in? Or am I choosing to show up in a better way in a relationship that I'm in? Those could be examples. The personal choices really run the gamut. I mean, it could be I choose to work with a coach or therapist. I choose to take an adventure. I choose to travel. I choose to begin taking some new education courses. I choose to heal my relationship with my mother. I choose to begin focusing on a self-care practice. I mean, it's the gamut of things. And there's something incredibly powerful about stating the choice. And every client that I work with privately, and I teach this in my book as well, there's to really craft the choice with specificity. To say I choose to, it could be as simple as I choose to explore a new job. It could be something that's a bit more granular. I choose to explore a new job where I live abroad. I'm just as an example of something that's a bit more specific. And once you've got the specificity of the choice, now you can begin asking yourself a lot of questions.
When you were saying all those possible choices, what went through my mind was I could make the choice to start making choices and not let life just happen to me. I could choose to make a choice.
You have said something so interesting. I created a quiz shortly after the book came out, and my purpose for it was that one of the things that I was observing was how many different decision makers there are. So, for example, I happen to make choices really quickly. I don't deliberate a lot. I get my information, I process it intuitively, and I move forward. Then there are those other people who, may process a lot and they still stick their head in the sand. They don't make a choice. Or maybe they process a lot and they're like, they're scared of making a mistake. So they stay in that place of indecision. Or the person who deliberates a lot before they feel comfortable. There are many, many, many different types of choice makers. And one of the things that I've experienced, and I will say, I don't know this is a fully accurate, but it's been my experience. I tend to speak to people, at all the different decades. And I recently was doing a beautiful series with a group of elderly women. And when we were having this conversation of choice, many of them said to me, Kim, I've never made choices. I didn't grow up in a time when I had the ability to make a choice. And then I was told to marry, and I married a man, and my husband made the choices. It was very interesting generationally. I don't often hear that with a younger community, but I do hear very often that people are resistant to making choices. They're scared. I mean, I see many, many people in my life who will say, oh, I'm not good at choices. I avoid making choices. I hear that so often. I really do.
And making a choice not to make a choice is a choice.
It is a choice.
It is a choice. Yeah, that's really because people have said to me how quick I am to make a decision. You decided, even a big deal, you decided to do that fast. And in their eyes, I did. In my eyes, I didn't.
Because you were processing.
I was processing it before. Yeah. But once I decide, that's it. I mean, let's do it. Let's get at it.
And have you always been that way? Or
I think so. My parents are no longer with us, but I'll have to ask my sister, because I'll bet I was, because that is just so natural to me. And I have to be very careful to be patient with people who take a long time to make choices. Oh my gosh, could we just decide and get going here?
I'll tell you something funny. My husband is a realtor. Now, being a realtor, you have to know the reality is people looking at houses may not make decisions quickly. Some may see a house, love it, say yes, not the norm. Others have to bring their mother and their best friend and their college roommate, and they still can't make a decision. And he gets crazy. And I'm like, this is what it is. You signed up for a profession of people who are indecisive. Like, that's just the nature of it. I find it very interesting to observe how people make different decisions. And I probably am similar to you. I think on the surface, people may say that I'm impulsive, but I'm not impulsive. Like, I'm processing it internally. And once I know, I move forward. Nobody may be aware of what I processed internally to get to that place, but it sounds like you and I have a similar quality. But I will say we are not the norm. So
really?
No, well, at least from the data I have from those who taken the quiz, I will say the bulk of the people fall into a version of a deliberator. They need to take in the information quite a bit. Some, again, may take it in and then they're solid and they move forth. Others take it in, still want to avoid, still fearful of making the wrong choice. I mean, it's really quite interesting. And I would say more people, from my experience, fall into the deliberator quality.
I think of one of the biggest, I mean, it was a material choice, but it was one of the biggest material choices I ever made was to buy this house that and I had spent a lot of time knowing where I wanted to live, what I sort of wanted the house to be like, that. When this real estate agent took me into this house and when I looked around and looked outside and came back and he said, okay, I'd like to buy this. And he looked at me like I had just lost my mind. Said, what? I'd thought about it for a long time before I saw the house. And once I saw the house, I knew that was the house. That's really interesting, Kim. I'd never really processed that way before.
And I think what you're saying, I guess my hope is I want to bring decision making to the forefront of people's thoughts. So here's a beautiful story. Lovely friend of mine, she's probably mid-80s. She was learning about my book. And one of the things that I speak about early on in the introduction is the concept of making what I call an examined choice and living an examined life, which means that you bring thought and intentionality to your choices. And she called me after she'd read it and she said, is it too late? And I said, is it too late for what? She said, I've never lived an examined life. I've never brought thought to my choices. Can I do it now? I said, you could start tomorrow, like right now. Like it's never too late. And that's kind of the beauty. So I think at any point, at any stage in the continuum of life, if you realize you want to be more thoughtful and intentional about the choices you make, you just start. I mean, it really almost is that simple. And my hope, one of my big dreams, and this is something certainly on my unfolding map, is I want all freshmen in college to read my book. I imagine if they were to have that new awareness as an 18, 20-year-old, to be able to say, oh, wow, I could really be thoughtful. And, I've typically involved my parents in my choices. Wow, this is really falling on me now. What will it take for me to have the clarity so that I can make decisions with confidence? That's very powerful. Imagine how the world starts to change as we have a community of younger people who are more thoughtful about the decisions they make.
Well, and people who are willing to choose to make choices rather than to just let life happen or follow or whatever.
That's it.
So one of the things I can imagine is that sometimes people will come to you feeling awful about choices they made in the past and living with the shame or the guilt or whatever, bringing it forward, maybe for years. What can you say to them?
I have lived through a lot of that. So when I mentioned those first 29 maps that I did, I would say a high percentage of them had a component of looking back and feeling either regret or shame for something that they had done. And I tend to be somebody who says, okay, let's look at it. Let's acknowledge like what actually happened. And maybe you did make a bad choice. And maybe you did make a choice that hurt somebody that, where you didn't do the right thing. What would it look like to forgive yourself? What would it look like to go back to that younger version of yourself? Obviously, if you were wiser, you may have done something different. And to let that go so that that shame is not now tethering you for the rest of your life. I had an interesting circumstance happen. I learned of a young man, probably 18-ish, who had plagiarized a paper using AI. And I heard that he'd been expelled. Now, I didn't meet this boy, but I began to think, I thought, imagine the shame this young man must feel about the choice. Now, imagine this man at 50, if he doesn't deal with the shame of that choice. He's never going to get anywhere in life. He's going to sit thinking he's a loser, that he did something bad, that he's a cheat. He could have every story attached to that from what was a bad 18-year-old choice. Versus if he had supportive mentors in his life who could say, you know what, you did make a bad choice. Let's make amends, deal with it, be honest about it. How do you come across the other side so you can now live a productive life and not carry the weight of that choice for the rest of your life. I think it's very powerful, but it takes people being willing to go and look at the truth of what they did. I mean, we all have things we wish we wouldn't have done. And had we been wiser, we wouldn't have done them, likely. And it takes owning it. And it may take apologizing. It may, there may be all the components that are involved in that. But I think going in with the belief that you can handle whatever darkness you may have to look at, with support, whatever you may need, so that you can move forward more whole way and live the life you want to live, I think you owe it to yourself to do the work. I really do.
One of the things I hear people talk about sometimes is in forgiving themselves, or more particularly often, forgiving somebody else. They feel like they're saying that it's okay. And I find it really hard for myself sometimes and for others to help people understand, to help me understand. I'm not saying it's okay. It's not okay. It's not okay that this happened. It's not okay that I did this. It's not okay that you did that. But let's look at it and go forward. So by offering forgiveness or offering apology or going back and really looking at it, I'm not saying it. He's not saying it's okay I did that. It is not okay that I did that. And it was not a good choice.
I opened the book with a very important choice, which was the choice to end my relationship with my mother, which was a big deal. There was a lot of story and stuff, and there I am making that choice. Interestingly, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but I found my way back to my mother. And in so doing, there was forgiveness for things that had happened. And it's an interesting experience because I'm not dismissing what happened. I'm just choosing, and very consciously choosing, to say, I want to be in a relationship with my mother right now. And to be in relationship with my mother right now, I have to stop holding what happened over her, because otherwise there's no chance for today. And what that means is that I don't go back and tell those stories. I just don't. I've made the choice, like there's a line in my life and I just don't say it. And right now I love my mother so much. And I am who I am because of how I was raised and all of those pieces. And, it's for her to deal with the things that she did. And I can't heal that for her. But I have made a very conscious choice as her daughter that I've chosen to love her for who she is. And that wasn't so easy. But, it's not forgiving what was. It's choosing that I want her in my life. And I make that choice daily. I really do.
That's powerful, Kim. So we are at the end of our time, and I can imagine that having listened to you, people are going to want to get in touch with you. How can they do that?
Well, you know what I'll invite people to do, since we've spoken about the quiz? Take the quiz. Go find out a little bit about yourself. And when you take the choice quiz at thechoicequiz.com, you'll learn about yourself, you'll get some information, and that will give you an opportunity to be connected with me when you do that. And you can also certainly find me on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active. But the choice quiz is a great place to get started.
Okay, so give me that website again where people would go.
Thechoicequiz.com.
Thechoicequiz.com. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. So that's our time today. Please join us again. You can find our Prime Spark podcast on every popular outlet. Find out more about Prime Spark at primesparkwomen.com. Thank you so much to my guest, Kim DeYoung. And don't forget, take her quiz at thechoicequiz.com. Thechoicequiz.com. Thank you for being with us. Spread tolerance and love. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to stay updated, you can head over to my website, primesparkwomen.com, and get my free Spark Guide, 7 questions to ignite your spark, to help you discover your own spark. See you in the next episode.